The man at table 7 thought he was invisible, and that was his first mistake. 11 years earlier, he had learned how easy it was to disappear if you carried the right secret and sold it to the right people. Harlem had burned behind him that night, sirens echoing like angry ghosts, while a suitcase full of cash sat heavy in his hands. He told himself survival had no rules. Betrayal was just another word men used when they lost. By the time the train crossed state lines, he was already practicing a new name, tasting it like a lie that might become true if he said it enough. Now, more than a decade later, he sat comfortably in a warm restaurant far from Lenox Avenue. The place smelled of roasted meat and expensive wine, the kind of spot where no one asked questions as long as the bills were paid. Soft jazz floated through the air, wrapping the room in a false sense of safety. He loosened his tie, leaned back in his chair, and smiled. He had earned this life, he told himself. 11 clean years. No knocks on the door at midnight, no shadows following him home. Bumpy Johnson was either dead or old, and Harlem was a story people told to scare themselves. He didn't see the man who entered quietly, dressed plain, movements smooth and unhurried. The betrayer never noticed how the waiter's shoes didn't match the uniform, or how his eyes scanned the room, not for tips, but for exits. Table 7 was positioned perfectly, back to the wall, clear view of the door, a habit the betrayer had never quite broken. Old instincts die hard, especially when they're soaked in fear. Still, tonight felt different. Tonight felt normal. That was what fooled him. As he reached for his glass, his mind drifted back to the moment everything changed. The whispered meeting. The envelope slid across the table. The promise that one small piece of information would end Bumpy Johnson forever. He had believed it then. He had believed that powerful men fell easily, that legends were fragile. What he never understood was that Bumpy didn't hunt like other men. He waited. He let guilt rot the soul before he ever touched the body. The waiter approached table 7, placing bread on the table with deliberate care. Their fingers brushed for half a second, long enough to send a chill up the betrayer's spine. He laughed it off, cursing himself silently. Paranoia, he thought. Just old habits. But somewhere deep inside, a voice he had ignored for 11 years began to scream. Harlem doesn't forget. Harlem keeps books, and every debt, no matter how old, stays open until it's paid in full. 11 years of running had taught him how to look calm, while his heart calculated exits. The betrayer had mastered the art of appearing settled. Mortgage paid on time, neighbors who waved, a wife who believed every word he fed her about his past. He told her he grew up ordinary, that he worked hard, that he was lucky. Luck was easier than truth. Truth had weight, and weight slowed you down. So he buried it beneath routine, beneath smiles, beneath the clink of silverware and the comforting lie that the past eventually gets tired of chasing you. As he sat at table 7, he replayed the night he ran for the 1,000th time. Rain hammered the pavement like gunfire. A black car waited with its engine humming low, impatient. The man who handed him the suitcase never used his name, never made eye contact. Just a nod and a warning. Don't look back. He didn't. Not when the city lights faded. Not when Harlem disappeared in the rearview mirror. He thought distance was the same thing as escape. He was wrong. The waiter returned, refilling his water without a word. Up close, the man's face was forgettable. Exactly the kind of face that slid through crowds unseen. But there was something in his eyes that didn't belong to service or politeness. They were flat, disciplined, carrying the calm of someone who had already decided how the night would end. The betrayer felt his mouth go dry. He tried to speak, to make a joke, to reassert control, but the words tangled behind his teeth. He glanced around the room, measuring the distance to the door, to the windows, to the restrooms. Everyone else was absorbed in their own lives, their own conversations, their own harmless dramas. No one was watching him. That was the worst part. When the world doesn't see you, it can't save you. The jazz music swelled, the bass slow and steady, like a pulse counting down. The waiter leaned in slightly, pretending to adjust a plate. His voice was low, nearly swallowed by the music. "You ran a long time," he said. The betrayer's breath caught. No name, no accusation, just a statement of fact. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. He felt suddenly foolish for ever believing the debt had expired. Harlem didn't work on calendars. It worked on memory. A flash of metal appeared for a headbeat, reflected in the polished surface of a spoon, then vanished beneath the table. The betrayer's legs went numb. He understood then that this wasn't chaos or anger. This was order. This was a message delivered with patience. The waiter straightened, placing a napkin neatly beside the plate. "Mr. Johnson sends his regards," he whispered, and in that moment, the betrayer realized the truth he had spent 11 years running from. Some betrayals don't end when you escape. They just wait for the right table, the right night, and the right silence. The razor moved so cleanly that the betrayer barely felt it at first. There was no pain, only pressure, like a firm hand guiding his head forward. The jazz kept playing. Forks kept rising and falling. Laughter drifted past his ears as if the world had agreed, silently, to look away. By the time he understood what had happened, his body was already giving up on him. Warmth spread across his collar, slow and intimate, and his vision blurred at the edges like an old photograph left in the sun. The waiter stepped back, smooth as a thought, erased before it could finish. He folded the napkin once, placed it beside the plate, and adjusted the chair so it didn't scrape the floor. No rush, no drama. This wasn't a killing meant to shock, it was meant to conclude. The kind of ending you give to a story that's gone on too long. The betrayer tried to breathe, but the air wouldn't cooperate. His mind raced, not with fear, but with regret. Faces surfaced, men he'd trusted, corners he'd stood on, nights in Harlem when he'd believed loyalty was everything. He saw himself younger, desperate, convincing himself that one decision wouldn't define him. 11 years later, that single moment was the only thing that mattered. The irony cut deeper than the blade. All that running, all that careful living, just to die quietly where no one even knew his real name. Someone at a nearby table complained about the wine being too warm. A waiter apologized. Life corrected itself instantly, eager to move on. When the man at table 7 finally slumped forward, it looked almost natural, like sleep had simply claimed him mid-meal. By the time anyone noticed the thin red line at his throat, the one who put it there was already gone, absorbed into the street, into the city, into the long memory of Harlem. Miles away, in a dimly lit room uptown, Bumpy Johnson sat alone. He didn't smile when the call came. He didn't celebrate. He poured himself a drink and let it sit untouched. Revenge wasn't sweet to him. It was heavy, necessary, a responsibility, not a pleasure. He had learned long ago that power wasn't about speed or noise. It was about patience, about letting men believe they were safe long enough to forget who they had crossed. Bumpy stared at the glass, the ice slowly cracking. 11 years was a long time to wait, but some lessons couldn't be rushed. He didn't speak the betrayer's name. Names didn't matter anymore. What mattered was balance. Harlem had been wronged, and Harlem had answered, and somewhere in a quiet restaurant, at an ordinary table no one would remember tomorrow, the final truth settled into the walls. You can change your name, your city, your life, but betrayal ages like steel. It doesn't rust. It sharpens, and when it finally comes for you, it doesn't come screaming. It comes calm, precise, and right on time.